This is indeed a day that we've worked, and the team has worked very hard to see. As an organization, one of the commitments, or one of the things as KCDF, one of the things that we want to be identified with, and one of the things that areas that we've invested since the organization was founded many years ago, has been being a capacity building or a capacity sharing organization. And so what we've done in the last 1 year was to curate, look at all the content that we have, look at the do an assessment of diverse civil society organizations in East Africa, and come up with a list of key areas that we want to have curated conversations around. I will be pasting in the chat just so that you can see some of the areas that we want to, or some of the areas that we are currently investing in. I think I've already pasted there. And so in the next few months, you will see in social media and other spaces as trying to encourage you to register for different capacity building training sessions online. At the very end of this training, I know Ken will at some point talk about a portal or an app where you can actually go and access some of these materials and content online at your own pace, at your own speed. And so it is our hope as we do this that, and now if I can come back to HR and admin management, which has been co-created by KCDF and Light Up Impact, with the support from Femi Foundation. So what we are trying to do is to, most of the time people focus a lot of trainings on program issues. People, a lot of trainings on things that directly affect the programs. But rarely do we get into communications, into things to do with human resources. And for many organizations, whether it is an organization of 1, 2, 3 people, or whether it's a big organization, the first thing the first interaction is usually an interaction of people within the first interaction, the main interaction in organization is usually an interaction of people within an organization. And so it is our hope that as you generate more complexities within your organization, that you will find this training useful in helping you relate very well, better, in helping you attract more talent within your organizations. And so it is my hope that also as we do the varied generation of post and pre-training surveys, that you're going to give us feedback in a very honest way, so that then we can improve the offering. Otherwise, in this place, I think I'm seeing organizations from Tanzania, welcome. I'm seeing organizations from Uganda, welcome. And so we're hoping that we are going to have a truly East African conversation in these few days that we are going to do this series. I also take this opportunity to encourage everyone to complete the series. And at the end of the day, we will try to see how we can issue you with the digital certificates to just appreciate that you also took the training and that you went through the entire training. So thank you so much.
We're going to start off with right away with the objective of this training with regard to the HR function. So the idea is that we want, it is useful to have an understanding of the importance of the HR function, the pillars, and the key steps in establishing the HR functions in your organizations. Now, this is important because we are aware that each organization in attendance are at different stages of maturity, where you'll have the really young ones who have smaller sizes, and of course, the fairly large organizations that can be able to have a separate standalone HR unit that will address the HR function. Next question is, why is HR important? Now, HR is important for any kind of organization, whether big, large, or small, because first and foremost, it deals with talent. Talent basically is with regard to the human beings that form the main resources in organizations. You may not have a standalone unit in HR, but the principles of HR that must be applied, whether it's someone doubling up, doing something else, but driving the HR agenda in each organization. Now, the reason this is important is because the HR function will deal with talent management. Talent management basically is recruiting individuals whose values align with the organization's mission. And then the job starts with retaining the talent you've recruited and of course identified that will foster the organization's objectives. Benefits of the HR function in the talent management will include reduced turnover rates, because we all know that when you have a turnover, there's consistency in delivery of your objectives, and subsequently there's an associated cost. So it also factors into the cost of talent management. Another benefit that we'll have is the enhanced employee satisfaction, which will trickle down to overall productivity and eventually the success of the organization. Now, another reason why HR is so important for organizations such as yourselves is the legal compliance. Now, laws keep changing, and you have to, as an organization, you have to be able to protect yourself by complying to statutory regulations, specific laws, and of course, reputational damage. So, so that there's no adverse impact for your organization that will deviate from your stated objective. And of course, the HR function with legal compliance promotes fair treatment of employees, and employees subsequently develop trust in the organization. Some of the key areas of compliance include clear terms of engagement, whether it's contractual or it's voluntary. Each term must be clear for both parties, and workplace policies is another benefit. And then there's the payroll and benefits that is regulated through tax laws from whichever area you're from, whether it's Uganda, Tanzania, or Kenya. Operational efficiency is another important component that the HR function supports. Now, this starts off to really become operationally efficient. Each organization must have an organizational structure, and this is the HR function. Now, this will support collaborations across units or activities or functions. Then secondly, there'll be the need. The HR function will also provide clearly defined roles and responsibilities to prevent redundancies or gaps. Another reason why organizations should have a robust HR function is sustainability. Now, this basically means you're developing a pipeline for human resource to ensure organizational continuity. So this touches a bit on talent development or training that we'll touch on later on. And also, it also brings about the continuous professional development of future-proof workforce, such that whatever happens to the organization, whatever external environmental impacts that affect the organization, the workforce will be a sustainable one, and one that will carry through the organization through challenges. Examples of sustainable practices will include leadership training, programs that prepare staff for growth and advancement in the organization. Also, succession planning is part of ensuring sustainability in the organization. And while training, it is useful to align any training with organization strategic goals so that everybody's pulling in the same direction. The next section that I will look at is with regard to the key components of HR. Now, the key components of HR, as you can see, include recruitment and selection, training and development, performance management, employee engagement, compliance, and legal issues. These are some of the things that I've touched on briefly up there. But just to expound on recruitment and selection, you'll realize that recruitment and selection are two separate words. Basically, the recruitment process starts the moment an organization declares a vacancy. Of course, each organization has its own approval processes up to the point where candidates are called in for interviews. That end to end from the declaration of a vacancy up to candidates being invited for interviews, that is the recruitment process. And different organizations have different processes for this. Now, selection is the interview process, interview and assessment, where you sit in and you assess the candidates. Now, the key elements that are really important for the recruitment process will go into detail a little later on when we tackle the recruitment component or the recruitment policy. However, as a major building block, a clear and specific job description is required for you to be able to effectively deliver on this key pillar of the HR function. Some of the best practices in ensuring this happens is using inclusive language in the job postings so that you can attract diverse candidates, and so that the candidate applying has a full understanding of what they're applying for and is able to assess themselves before they make that application. And of course, you must establish an objective criteria to evaluate candidates before you go into the selection part of this key pillar. Another key, the next key pillar that I want to expound on a little bit is the training and development, where it's important to keep employees updated on industry trends and best practices, and also improve the training and development also improves adaptability to changing organizational needs. Because as you well know, your space is very dynamic and things change at a moment's notice. And then types of training will include orientation. This is normally underestimated. The way you orientate new hires in your organization has an impact on how they perform going forward. So that is a very key factor. And then, of course, on the job training, including specific targeted training initiatives. Performance management is a must in any organization, and it's a key pillar because this means measuring successes, measuring improvements, and of course, that is tied up with the reward. And I want to be very clear here that reward does not necessarily mean monetary reward. There's all sorts of there's a range of opportunities that an organization can take to be able to reward and feel and make their employees feel appreciated. And of course, with performance management, a key thing with this is that it provides constructive feedback. Employee engagement, basically, this is conducted through surveys, basically looks at how employees have bought into the values and the objectives of that organization. So this survey, an employee engagement survey will be able to give you pointers on what you need to do to improve that engagement, and subsequently, ultimately improve productivity and performance of your employee. I mentioned compliance, and I mentioned it here again as a key pillar, staying current with the changing labor laws and maintaining records. Without any records, nothing exists. So that's very critical. I want to walk through our next slide is about how do you set up a HR structure from scratch. First and foremost, like I mentioned, that different sizes of organizations and at different stages of growth. So one of the key things you need to do is to make an assessment of your organization's needs. So you look at the sizes, the complexity of the organization. You look at, you must be able to look at the immediate requirements, look at the medium term, and of course, long-term HR requirements, so that you can be able to set up your HR structure. And then the second step is to create clear job descriptions that define clear roles. And this comes up again, and as you can see, is critical, because with a detailed job description, expectations are shared. What the organization expects from the employee, and what the employee profile is also included in these job descriptions. And typically job descriptions are aligned with organizational goals. Okay. The third step is design of an efficient and objective recruitment process. Now, you realize that recruitment is the entry point for any organization, well, with the exception of founders. But recruitment then will dictate the pace and the quality and the profile of the staffing staff that an organization will have. Now, if you get this wrong, then there's a domino effect where it will be very difficult to right the ship when this is skewed. So it's very important to design an efficient and transparent recruitment process. The fourth step is the implementation of performance management and training system. So the first thing in implementation of a performance management system is to develop a performance appraisal cycle. Now, this basically means that you need to agree, based on your needs and the complexity of involved in the organization, you need to agree whether you want to have quarterly performance appraisals, half yearly or annual. Typically, you'll find that organizations that have grown and have had performance management systems or performance appraisal systems for a long time have grown from shorter period appraisals to the annual ones, because they've grown confident and learning has also taken place. Finally, the fifth step is development of policies, which eventually culminates into a HR manual. Okay. I hope up to there I'm clear. I just want to give an overview of the importance of the HR manual. First and foremost, all these policies we're talking about would be included or consolidated in the HR manual, so that it provides consistency across departments and functions. Everybody knows that, look, this is what needs to happen in the event of a situation, and then It also prevents misunderstanding and ensures employees understand their rights and responsibilities, and also clarifies expectations from behavioral performance and basically workplace standards. And it also provides, it also avoids misunderstanding within the organization. So this is the first part of this training, and it basically has covered the basics with regard to the HR function. Now, we'd like to open the field up for any questions with regard to what we've covered so far. So feel free to even request that we go back to a slide so that we can expound more. Any questions so far? You can also let me know if I'm moving too fast or too slow. Questions? Yes, Wanja? Wanja, Maina?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the conversation so far. I wish that we'll be sent the presentation later. I have a question. I run an organization which is a nascent young women-led organization called the Hummingbird Grassroots Center. While I don't know what is ahead in terms of the training, most of the work that we do for us, especially when we haven't been able to secure big grants, involves working a lot with volunteers. So you find myself in a situation where I cannot sustain employees, but I still have individuals or young people who are affiliated with us in the sense that whenever we have activities, they take leadership role. I give them a stipend. Whenever there's a meeting, I'll facilitate their transport and what have you. So
Okay.
even as you teach us about how to deal with HR, who are people who have a contractual obligation with our organization, I wonder if you can maybe now in the future training help us to understand how to navigate the issue of getting young ambassadors, getting young volunteers. What are the politics or what are the ways of engaging them to ensure that we are fair, but also we don't overstep in terms of the relationship. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Wanja. I think I'll just give a quick response to that. The reality for your space is that you deal a lot with volunteers. And what I've found is that managing volunteers becomes a challenge because their commitment levels are not as high as staff that you have on contract. So what happens is that you have two sets of rules that are clear. Now, the contracted staff would be held accountable by one set, and the volunteers would also have their own set of regulations, and this is unavoidable because the terms are totally different, and you'll find that the reality is that even the exit for each party follows a totally different path. So the HR manual would have to be comprehensive and would have to clearly demarcate the difference of the two. Susan Cheme, I hope I've answered Wanja. Susan Cheme?
Greg, I have to inform you that we're running already 15 minutes late on the agenda. So if possible, just take one more question and I will get one question from the chat because there are several questions as well there. And then we have to move on.
All right, we'll close out with Susan Cheme.
Mine is on looking at the pillars of HR that you've mentioned and narrowing down to training and development. You mentioned about orientation, and
Yes.
maybe request you to just give a brief highlight of what are the must touch in orientation?
Okay. Orientation basically requires the organization to ensure that there's a cultural fit for the new hire. So with the orientation, one of the key components is the new hire has to go all the way around the areas in the organization so that they have a good feel of what is expected of them. Orientation should not, secondly, orientation should not be a tick the box activity. It must be well structured in the sense that at the end of the orientation period, there's sign-off between. Now, basically, like I mentioned earlier on, this is a very key policy because it's the entry point for any organization. Now, with a properly structured recruitment and selection policy that provides clarity, this also provides a structured approach in hiring and ensuring fairness and transparency. Now, the recruitment policy should also align recruitment practices with organizational goals, so that when you're doing, when you're going through this process, you should be able to be clear that this is the kind of profile that you're looking for. Now, this is important because it also guides against unconscious bias. You'll find that because of our exposures, you have a bias for a certain gender based on maybe experiences you've had previously or in different organizations. However, with a structured policy, it takes care of those biases, and you're able to come out with a fair outcome. The recruitment policy also takes care of compliance with legal and ethical standards. You will agree that the pool of candidates from which organizations are drawing from right now have become very enlightened and are quick to go to take legal redress the moment they feel they've been slighted. So with this kind of with this policy, you're able to insulate the organization so that you align yourself to the labor laws and ensure equal opportunities with regard to the regulations in the regions that you're coming from. There's a very high impact on the organization's success depending on how you execute this policy. Because it helps you attract skilled candidates who align with the organization's missions, and also enhances employee branding by fostering a reputation for organizations. When your profile as an organization is elevated, it is that much easier for you to attract the kind of talent you require. Now, I'm going to look at some of the elements of recruitment. Some of these elements I've discussed above, so we'll just go through them. One of the key ones is, of course, the job descriptions, and I mentioned about clarity and definition of roles and responsibilities. And also with job descriptions, you're very clear on your reporting lines, and it also outlines required qualifications, skills, and competencies. The best practice there is basically to be concise and use inclusive language, and also link the job descriptions to organization goals. Another component is sourcing of candidates. Currently, there are various methods of sourcing for candidates that include social media platforms. Word of mouth has been very effective. And of course, industry-specific platforms. Also, partnering with community organizations to reach underrepresented groups has also worked effectively. The interview process is another component of, another element of recruitment. Now, the interview process must be structured, and I mentioned this is very useful so that you're able to capture the behavioral and develop standardized questions. The best practice right now is to use an interview tool that captures experiential factors and is focused on competencies. A lot of the mistakes that organizations have made previously is use a standard tool to recruit across roles and competencies, probably adjust it here and there. Best practice is to, for every position, you align to the job description. And of course, the job description was the main source document for the advertising of these roles. So you align your tool to the job description and use that to capture the competencies that are required for that job. Then you'll have success in recruiting the right resource. Fairness in selection. There must be fairness that is demonstrable in the selection, and also another factor that must be considered in the selection criteria is documentation of the process. This is useful for auditing purposes and basically quality assurance that you're going through the process properly. And also this helps out when, for example, the organizations who keep recruiting and losing staff, and so they're in a vicious cycle. So with documentation, you're able to review the process and identify areas of weakness that you can be able to improve on. Okay, there's a question, just the last element before we go into the group activity. There's a question on onboarding. So onboarding is also a key element that helps in the smooth integration of new hires to become productive quickly. So if you have an effective onboarding process, productivity kicks in much earlier, and it's useful for the organization's progress. And then it also promotes engagement of staff and retention from the very start. We can move on to the next slide. Okay, just before we move on to the next slide, I just want to give some very quick steps so that it also addresses some of the questions, one of the questions that came about. Key steps include providing a thorough orientation about the organization, including mission, policies, and culture. This is the culture fit that I was talking about. And then assigning a mentor or a buddy for guidance is very useful. This is a practice that happens quite a bit and needs to be encouraged, and also clear expectation for the probation period. What happens is that organizations recruit and onboard and confirm, then start having issues with the employee. It is important that we make use of the probation period. Okay, now we're moving on to the group activity. Based on the recruitment process, and I'd like
Greg, sorry,
yes.
This is Valeria. This is just a reminder, you have 10 minutes for both the group activity and the Q&A.
All right, that's noted. Now, very quickly, I would like at least one participant to share with us a challenge in the recruitment process that they encountered, so that we can see if we can provide solutions or options for them. So I'd really like participants to get involved in this. Anybody with a specific experience, live experience that we can be able to plug into. Anyone? We only have 10 minutes. Can raise up your hand. Unless you already have, you'll have very smooth recruitment processes.
Hello to everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, Rosalind. Sorry, who is that?
This is Mary.
Yes, Mary.
I would like to share an experience I had.
Yes.
Just not necessarily that I was recruiting, but I was being recruited for a position.
Yes.
And it's something that I experienced, which I think maybe we could learn from a little. That we had a very prolonged recruitment period where there was an interview that was scheduled, and I went through several interviews, and every time that my interviewers would schedule this interview, they would tell me that that time is not appropriate. I was being recruited by interviewers who were in a different continent, so we had time differences. So I would give them time when I'm available, and every time that time would come and they are not available, and the interview process dragged on and on and on. And eventually, of course, after several interviews, they said they would get back to me, and they stayed for a while without getting back to me. When they eventually did, they said that they have decided to move on with a different person instead. So I said, okay, no, can you give me feedback on how I performed so that I can also now be able to perform better in a different interview? They didn't give me that interview. They went mute on me for like 3 weeks. Then they eventually got back to me and said, okay, we think we want again to start a fresh round of interviews with you. We still think you can be a good fit for our organization. Are you available? I told them, well, yeah, I am available. I had wanted that job really. And so we started another back and forth of when are you available? What time is good for you? And all that. And eventually that second round of interview didn't happen. And they sent me a letter saying, oh, the organization had decided not to recruit for that position. And so, of course, it was a disappointment and a total waste of my time. And later on, of course, after I think a week or two, I saw that they had posted the same job description and they were looking for fresh recruitees. So for me, I think that was quite a chaotic process, and I think maybe you could help us and maybe help us to know how exactly we should treat people we would like to recruit for our organizations, so that you don't end up losing people that you could actually benefit from and who could be a very good fit for your organization. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mary. Very quickly, whenever such things pop up at the point of recruitment, it is a red flag. I'm saying this from the perspective of you as CSOs. You take from Mary's experience, and you totally avoid how the behavior of the recruiting organization that she was dealing with, because it clearly points to inefficiencies in their processes or a lack of processes. So Mary might be very lucky for not having joined that organization, because the red flag is that if at entry there are such struggles, then it is anybody's guess what are the issues are there internally. Quickly, Rosalind. Rosalind, can we have Rosalind? If Rosalind,
it seems like he needs to be unmuted, Jose, for Rosalind. She wrote in the chat.
yes,
Thank
Rosalind.
you. Yes, thank you. I was being unable to unmute. So
Okay.
mine goes as a question.
Yes.
I'm running an arts organization in Nairobi, Kenya, named Ta Arts Organization. So I'm looking at the trajectory so far. Like we don't have people where you get personnel and they stay for a very long time. So what I would like to know is when you don't have enough funding or you don't have funding and you want to keep staff that you get on board, how do you navigate that? How do you navigate that situation so that when you have someone, they can stay because of at least the skills, and then as you look for funding so that you can be able to, you know, compensate them better as opposed to when you don't have funding. Then I also have a situation that I went through a while back. There's a role I took up, though the salary was quite low. I had to like downgrade from what I was getting before that. So I took up the role and worked in it. I gained some experience, though with so many challenges, back and forth, back and forth. They'd always pick on me every other time. And then shortly after some months, the role ended. It was just a call off and they just ended the role. So I had to leave the workplace. And then later, like 3 months after I left, they rebranded the role and then they put it up for, you know, interviews and someone to take up the role. However, we are talking of now 2 years and they've never gotten someone in that role. So it's, for me, I learned that it speaks so much about the culture that the organization had. We didn't have a very healthy culture for us as employees. So I'm trying to create a healthy culture here at TATS organization so that whoever comes in can be able to, you know, grow and feel that they're comfortable to prolong or at least see their career to the best they'd like to get. So for me, I'd like maybe pointers on such situations. How do you navigate? Sometimes you find like people switching roles, they give them different names and they just want to make you feel like you're not competent enough, yet you are performing, but they will not appreciate your work. So what happens in such instances? Yeah, thank you.
Okay, to answer your first question, that was with regard to inability to afford the talent you want to retain. Now, it is, the reality is that talent knows that they're talented. And the principle in the workplace right now, or the workforce, as we are dealing with younger and younger talent, is that what's in it for me? So the moment you can't afford, then you're really disadvantaged. The only way you can deal with such a situation is transparency. You be very clear that this is what you have on the table, and this is as far as you can go. And you need to accept that you might want that talent, but you can't afford it. It's like you want a Mercedes, but you can afford a Toyota. So you just let it go, Rosalind. And the only other technique that I've seen working is taking up training and developing talent to a point where you know you can't afford them, and you know, let them go. And when you do that, you need to be cognizant that it's going to take 2 to 3 years for good talent to stay with you, because by 3 years they know they have the skills and they're attractive in the market, and they'll move on. And you know, you let them go and have a very good separation.
Yeah.
Because then it gives you an opportunity. When you get adequate funding, you can always bring them back in. Okay. Yeah. The second question is basically a toxic organization that is, they're not very clear on what they want. So there are a lot of internal dynamics that you can't really decipher with that basic information. But however, there's clearly a leadership problem, either at the HR level or at the very top. Valeria, am I out of time?
Yes, you should move on.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Let's move on. I'd really like to hear from, after this next, let's move on to the next slide. I'd really like to hear from our brothers and sisters from the region. Okay. We had scheduled a 5-minute break, but I think we still have the energy to proceed. Unless anybody objects, I think we should just proceed and utilize that 5 minutes at the end of the slide to ask questions and get some clarification. Okay, so let's just go to the slide, unless anybody objects from the participants. Now, the next policy we're going to tackle is to do with the code of conduct. Now, the code of conduct, basically, we would like the participants to understand the elements of, the code of conduct and how to apply it in their organizations. And the code of conduct is sometimes borderline because the main challenge usually is on how to enforce it, but it emanates mainly from the values of the organization. Some organizations may not have documented their values, but the founders must have had some thought process on why they want to get into this, the area or the space in which that civil organization is operating in. There are some values that have to be connected. You can draw a parallel between the operations, the area of operations, and the organization itself. The code of conduct sometimes emanates from the HR guidelines or the HR manual, where there are hard and fast rules, where if you infringe on them, then there's immediate disciplinary action taken. And then that those values or the code of conduct that are behavioral. Now, first and foremost, the purpose of the code of conduct, for a code of conduct, is to outline the expectations of behaviors, values, as I've said, and ethical standards of the organizations, and so that the employees, partners, this includes, this is one area that includes everybody. You don't need to have a different set for volunteers. Some organizations also include suppliers so that they have aligned values with regard to the code of conduct. And this helps maintain a positive culture and the organization's integrity and reputation. It is critical to document and outline these values and behavioral patterns or standards that are required. And the code of conduct will act as a guideline for decision-making and interpersonal interactions within the organization. Now, why is a code of conduct important for organizations? Now, it promotes a culture of respect and integrity and professionality. There are organizations that, for example, this is a very light example, where you'll go in and find everybody speaking their own vernacular. So this will immediately give you a picture of the professional standards that are in that organization. And then it also ensures consistent ethical behavior. Everybody's held to the same standard across the levels of the organizations, top to bottom. It also safeguards the organization's reputation and retains trust with stakeholders. So this, as a civil organization, this helps you project a professional standard and also makes you attractive to, funders or donors. They appreciate, it gives them confidence when they interact with the organizations and find that you have a certain level of professionalism. And I believe some even ask for a documented code of conduct to engage with you. And it also provides a framework within which you're able to address breaches of ethical behavior in the organization. I'll go into the key elements of a code of conduct. Ethical behavior and integrity. That's very key and is very straightforward. Avoiding unethical practices like favoritism, dishonesty, and exploitation, and treating colleagues, partners, and that instance where you start treating or looking down on a volunteer just because they are volunteers. So this provides a framework or guidance on how that is, every individual is treated. And then part of the key elements is confidentiality. In any organizations, all employees or partners are obligated to protect sensitive and private information. Yeah, but some may be highly confidential based on their roles and what they do, but there's a standard threshold that first and foremost, you need to protect the organization's private information. Accountability is another key element. It makes sure that, well, it promotes accountability within the employees so that employees take responsibility for their actions and decisions, including admitting mistakes and working so that you can work or focus towards corrective actions. Health and safety. Code of conduct. The code of conduct also covers health and safety within the workplace. And health and safety is not really just physical safety. Currently we are talking about mental health, which is not tangible, but it is a trend that is here with us. Clearly, given my profile, you know that you can tell that I'm not a Gen Z. So back in our day, mental health was not there. So this is also something new for me as well. And also, takes care of harassment-free, develops a harassment-free workplace. Conflict of interest. These are situations where personal interest may interfere with the organization's interests. So a code of conduct would have a component in it, when you're developing one, would have a component in it where it gives the staff or the employee or the partner or volunteer an opportunity to make a declaration, whether there is a potential or there is an actual conflict of interest in a given situation. So this full disclosure, such as financial interest in vendors or family relationships. Now, I want to be very careful here because there are organizations that actually thrive on bringing on board family relations, and they've succeeded in that. Most organizations I know do not wish to have those relations, especially when a relative has a direct report. So that when you're developing a code of conduct, given your own specific situation, you're able to regulate those and avoiding decisions or actions that could benefit personal interest over the organization's goal. This is a weakness of human beings, where they would put their own goals first and the organizations much later. Now, how to apply this? So those are the key elements. How to apply this, a code of conduct. A code of conduct, there must be regular training of employees and partners so that everybody's familiar with this code of conduct, so that there's no fallback where there's an infraction, then the person involved will say, I did not know. So there has to be clear, regular, and scheduled training on this. And then there must be open communication for questions or clarifications about the code. Now, it is important that you don't put yourself in a straitjacket and be open to evolution. So as your environment evolves, you're able to consider opinions to be able to be included, or so that you're able to review or upgrade the code of conduct. But fair warning, it is not useful to review a code of conduct too regularly, every 6 months or every year, annually. That for you to be able to change your code of conduct that regularly, it basically means that your values as an organization is changing. And it doesn't bode well for that rapid change. Enforcement is a key mechanism that you must include in a code of conduct, so that you establish a clear process for reporting and addressing violations, and monitoring updates is also very critical. And I've also mentioned that you have to be open to evolutions. Okay. As you're monitoring your updates, it is critical that you ensure, and this comes about because of organizational growth, it is critical that you ensure that you're aligned to the legal requirements of the land, so that you don't have a code of conduct set of rules that are inconsistent with the legal expectations, because then you'll be opening yourself to some legal challenges. So that takes care of code of conduct. We can go on to the next slide so that we can I'd like to invite, and I'd really be keen on our brothers and sisters from Tanzania, Uganda, if there's anybody from Rwanda, to participate at this point. Any questions, or specifically any situation you have experienced with regard to code of conduct? Yes, Nixon. Can you unmute Nixon so that we hear from him?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, George, for this information. Now, I wanted to ask you, especially in when you're developing a code of conduct or even a recruitment policy, you said that we need to align it to the legal expectations of the country. Yes. Now, I want you to advise me within the context of East Africa. If probably I'm in Kenya and probably there is an existing labor law that is a bit comprehensive, and I have the chance to hire or open branches in Uganda and Tanzania. In this case, when I'm developing my human resource policy document, how do I align? Do I align it for each and every country, or how do you think? How do you advise me to do it? Both the recruitment policy and the code of conduct.
Okay, there are organizations that have presence across different geographies. What they've done is that they've developed policies that are aligned to the specific geographies. Okay, now what guides this is depending on in the private sector is basically the bottom line. Okay, because the costs that impact, let's say, the recruitment, and of course, not so much code of conduct. Code of conduct can cut across. Now, however, in your space, you will find that it is useful to have a code of conduct that cuts across all the geographies, because your values should be standard right across. And in geographies that the standards or the legal requirements are lower than, let's say Uganda's legal requirements are much stringent or higher than Kenya, best practice is to adopt the higher one. Okay, I don't know whether that answers you. Now, this, let me go beyond. this would apply when it comes to pay, right? Because there's always a challenge where staff will say, look, because I am in Burkina Faso, I'm being paid less than what the same role is playing in Kenya. But there are other factors that come into play when it comes to pay as well, because the cost of living factor is also a consideration. However, just to respond to you, code of conduct would apply right across. Recruitment process, I would recommend that you apply the higher one. Okay. Jacqueline? Let's have Jacqueline.
Thank you. My name is Jacqueline Mwangi. I'm from a community-based organization called Community Voices Network. And my question would be linked towards the recruitment and code of conduct as well. How do you navigate when an employee violates the code of conduct? And sometimes you've gone through a rigorous recruitment process. I think ideally, possibly not had a probation period, but an employee wakes up and decides to resign abruptly. And sometimes either they are volunteers or you already had a contract with them. How do you, as a small community-based organization, navigate through that?
Okay, for small community-based organizations, it becomes a challenge. However, with regard to number one, always have a probationary period, so that by the 3-month period or whichever period it is, you're sure that this is someone that you want to keep. Secondly, an untidy exit should be regulated by the contract, not the code of conduct. So the contract clearly states that if you're leaving within the probation period, or if you're leaving after the probation period, the notice period is X amount of months, right? Now, the only way, there are not too many options that you have. The only way that you have, and I think this is becoming important nowadays because new employers are asking for referrals from old employers. So if you feel so aggrieved that you want to follow through, I've seen organizations following up with formal letters, because the moment a staff leaves without serving notice, it means they owe you money. I've seen organizations writing demand notes to employees who have left abruptly and therefore owe notice period. But that's extreme. However, sometimes it becomes necessary because then 1 or 2 or 3 employees leave abruptly, then it becomes a culture in your organization. So those who are left behind know they can do it and get away with it. So sometimes it becomes necessary to draw the line and set an example. I hope, Jacqueline,
thank you.
Gives you some. I'm looking for, yes.
Before you continue with the hands up, I just want to give a chance some of the questions in the chat to be answered. It's okay with you. So there's one question from David. Can an employer or employee use a code of conduct for defense in a court of law? Is code of conduct admissible in court of law?
Yes, it is, because maybe I didn't mention, may have slipped. As part of orientation around body, one of the things that is required as a best practice is that the employee the new hire is supposed to sign on the code of conduct that says that, look, I will adhere to this set of rules. Okay, so this is the basic principle. If as an employer I can fire you for an infraction of code of conduct, right, then it therefore follows that you can take me to court for firing you for that infraction. Because if I'm holding you accountable for it, you should hold me accountable for it as well. If you feel it's unfairly done and there's space for legal, certainly there is. The moment there's a signature on the document, then it can be used and admitted in court. Any other question?
Yeah, there's one more on code of conduct from Sharon. How does management take to reaffirm commitment to code of conduct?
I think reaffirmation of a commitment to a code of conduct happens through regular training. Now, if you do have regular trainings in an organization, and you see that it has a fully fledged HR function, and you see that officer level or an assistant is the one involved in delivering this training, then staff will read into that. However, to be able to reaffirm commitment to this, it is useful, and for better impact, it is useful to have leadership involved in this training, in the sense that they would even either deliver a component of the training, or have some presence or some opening remarks, so that they can be able to reaffirm this. So staff generally are visual people. So when they see that the leadership of that organization is involved, then they feel that this is an important thing in the organization.
Thanks, Greg. You have another, I would say, 5 minutes to take few more questions.
Okay, George Bayer. Let's have George.
Thank you. Thank you for this nice presentation. Mine is about the question of the contract and how one, let's say, leaves an organization. Maybe it was going to be covered later, but normally we say there is like a 1 month notice for an organization to, let's say, let somebody leave.
Yes.
Either the organization is obliged to give 1 month notice,
yes,
either to the employee to serve, or pay them cash.
Indeed.
And it is also the same to the employee, that if they want to leave immediately, it's either they give a month or they pay in lieu of notice.
Right.
Now, that 1 month may not necessarily just because of the payment of the cash, but also it is room to prepare for the next person coming, or for the organization to fill that position, so that there's continuity in service. But then in practice, you'll realize that one is employed, but then they're also looking for greener pasture or another opportunity that comes. And maybe that opportunity will be coming, and there is no time to wait. Either they are given an opportunity. If you take this job, you are even getting, let's say, double whatever you are getting in your current employment. And one starts thinking, now, should I give 1 month, or should I just leave and go? Now, in an organization where there is no a package that whenever one finishes their contract, they are leaving, then there is like a package to take them home. It's just the salary that is paid. The organization has nothing to hold.
Mm-hmm.
But then they cannot really put that employee to stay. They would leave anytime. And some would wait until when they get their paycheck for last month.
Yes.
Then they exit, and there is nothing that is remaining from the organization. What is the best practice that an organization can put? I have seen some other organizations who are employing even casual laborers, that they employ them, it's on a weekly basis, but they pay 1 week. So you always have a debt of 1 week, for example. In our organization's setup, the CBOs, is it practical? How do we do it so that we ensure if one wants to leave, they give really that 1 month notice, and there is nothing like a pay home package that is tied to their contract. Thank you.
Okay. This question sounds a bit similar to one that had been asked earlier. However, that happens quite a lot. Huh? Well, I think it has reduced over time. So what I've seen organizations do, like I mentioned, is if that begins happening a lot in your organization, it just means that the ones that remain will also get emboldened, and they know that in these Greg Limited organizations, this organization, I will be able to leave and they'll not hold me accountable, and I'll be able to go and enjoy my new double salary. What some organizations have done, or sometimes industry-wide, where there's a close collaboration, where if a staff is moving to another organization, there is number one, a requirement for a recommendation from your previous employer. And number two, there's the reference check. So that is totally up to the organization that is employing. However, granted, there's some organizations who they want that talent so much, they'd rather do you in and take that talent from you. Now, you realize that when staff leaves without serving notice, they've gone with your money. It is from a financial point of view, it is actually cash. And some organizations even show it in the bottom line. So then the individual owes you, so you can pursue them and demand payment for that. Some organizations have seen follow through where this new staff has gone to, and write a formal letter to the staff and copy it to the new organization, and also threaten legal action. So then it sends a message to the staff that are remaining, and also, you have enjoined the new organization the moment you've copied them in that they know that their new staff has defaulted, and but still they've gone ahead. And once you mention legal action, then you'll find things moving around. So those are the two ways that I've seen this being taken care of. Because if you let it slide, then everybody will do it to you. All staff will do it to you.
Thank you.
Okay. Valeria, I'm out of time.
You have 5 more minutes, so you can take one more question, I think.
Okay, let's have Michael Odeke. Can I unmute Michael?
Hello, Michael
Yes,
Odeke from Soroti. Soroti is in eastern Uganda.
Oh,
okay. We are working with an organization called the TESO Initiative for Peace. And my question on the issues of code of conduct is the increasing differentiation, a private person and a public person. There's a growing tendency today of people saying my private life is separate from my public life. So you work in an organization that exerts kind of a code of conduct, a defined code of conduct. But people are saying my freedom. For example, how would you reckon with a staff that performs well in as far as key performance indicators are concerned, but in his private life the person is a drunkard? He goes to drink out a lot, and he says, well, I came, I fulfilled all I was supposed to do, and when it comes to drinking, it is my personal business. You must have had an interesting scenario in Uganda where they are saying that was not an institutional position, that was a private position. So a person is occupying an office, and now maybe you will help us to say, what is the thin line differentiating between a public person and a private person in as far as managing human resources is concerned? How can we enshrine such provisions in the code of what? The code of conduct. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Michael. Nice to hear from you from Uganda. Now, there's always a thin line between private and official life. However, going by the example you've given, it is true that for as long as someone takes up activities privately after hours, the office hours, that do not impact the organization directly, then you don't have too much leeway. However, from experience, I know that when someone drinks excessively, purporting that it is their private life, it always spills over into work life, because they will not be able to perform when they come to the nature of alcohol consumption is that it has after effects well beyond the period of consumption. Now, I'll give you another example. If an organization, an NGO or a civil organization is operating in the space of protecting women or the girl child, you understand? And in the code of conduct, there's a clause on reputation of the organization. However, me as an employee, I go over and beat up my wife. You see, that is a cultural misfit. This person, I as an employee, definitely does not fit culturally in that organization, because I'm beating up my wife at home, but coming to an organization whose main values and goals is with safeguarding women or girl child, or females. So then there'd be a basis of separating with that staff, because it will bring disrepute to the organization. And even when you look at it from a donor's point of view, a funder, that I am the HR of that organization, but I'm beating up, or I'm the financial person, but I'm busy beating up my wife. Organizations, donors would shy away from, and the organization is condoning it, donors would shy away from that particular situation. So the design of the code of conduct would have to be carefully crafted that will safeguard the vision and the culture and the values of the organization in whichever way possible, so that when the staff signs on that this is something that I will abide by, then they can be able to be held accountable for it.
Greg?
Yes.
I would say we have one last question in the chat. We can take this and then you can move on to the next session. Okay. So the question is if there is any exemption in the code of conduct as a practice.
Okay. Now, the code of conduct is skewed towards inclusions, does not regulate exemptions. If the code of conduct is silent on a particular issue, that it means, number one, it's not important to the organization, and therefore it doesn't feel the need to include it. You will not find in a code of conduct document where it lists expectations with regard to the code of conduct, then has another short list for exemptions. Because if you go that route, then it would be exploited and abused and become ineffective. There needs to be clarity of the guidelines in the code of conduct. So it's black and white, basically. Okay. So we move on to the next. Okay. The final policy that we'll be looking at in this session is a conflict management policy, and you'll find that this has some relation with the code of conduct. Now, basically, what we would like, is that in this section we explore techniques and strategies for managing conflicts effectively. And the purpose of a conflict management policy is to provide a clear framework for addressing and resolving conflict. That is the main building block. That's the main purpose for this policy. So it would also promote respect and fairness in handling disputes, and also ensure consistency and transparency in conflict resolution, whereby staff A cannot do things with impunity and get away with it because of whatever relations of favoritism that are in play, and staff B is immediately held accountable if they do the same exact thing. Now, the benefits to the organizations is it builds trust, supports long-term sustainability by preventing recurring disputes. So if a section of staff are sacred cows, you'll find a recurrence of that and it's spread on. But with a comprehensive policy and process for conflict resolution, then it prevents recurrence and also enhances credibility with external stakeholders. Some of the key elements in conflict management includes understanding conflict types. Now, conflict types, very broadly, because this is not by any means exhaustive, but I've split them into three. There is interpersonal conflict. These are disputes between individuals due to personality differences or miscommunication. There is role-based conflict that arises from unclear job responsibilities or overlapping duties. And then there's organizational conflict. These are systemic issues such as resource allocation, policies, or cultural differences. Now, there are certain frequently used conflict resolution styles that I'd like to share with you. And I'd also like to say that this is by no means exhaustive. There's the authoritative style, where there's a conflict, they run it up the pole, and it reaches whichever level or authority, and they give directive immediately and expect that to be followed without question. There's the accommodating style, where you prioritize other needs over your own, and for the purpose of maintaining harmony. And then there's avoiding. There are those styles that people just withdraw from the conflict without addressing it, and therefore it festers and subsequently might blow up into something else. And then there's collaborating. This is working together to find a win-win solution where both parties or all the parties involved are happy. And then there's the compromising. Compromising is when a middle ground is found where each party makes a sacrifice for the good of all. Okay, now those are just some ways of handling conflicts, but there are some recommended techniques. They're not necessarily the best, but the recommended techniques to use for resolutions of conflict. Now, one of them includes effective communication. Key skills required here is active listening. I know all of you have been in, most of you have been in such a situation where you fully focus on the speaker without interrupting, let them vent through, share their opinion or their position. Then you begin to navigate a solution out of that and showing empathy. Sometimes, whenever there's a conflict, the aggrieved party just wants someone to empathize with them. So you understand the emotions and perspective of the aggrieved parties. And then most importantly, there's clear communication. So clear communication contributes directly to effective communication. So this is a very key element. There's also mediation and negotiation as a part of as part of conflict resolution. Now, mediation, the difference between mediation and negotiation is this. With mediation, there's a neutral third party who facilitates the resolution of the process so that it helps conflicting parties reach an agreement. A key thing here is that both parties or the parties involved must be able to view the mediator as a neutral party and not one that is taking sides. And then there's negotiation where there's dialogue and a mutually acceptable solution is found where everybody is agreeable. And in court, this is called consent. Everybody has agreed, this is the direction we take, and they sign on. Now, there are steps to address conflicts. Steps to address conflicts. The first step in identifying, in addressing a conflict is the identity of the issue. There has to be clear definition of the root cause of the conflict. In organization, and from previous experience, you'll find that when conflicts involve individuals of different hierarchies, and it goes up the authority level, the one with the hierarchy, by and large, has an advantage. So when you have a conflict management policy, that is an aspect that needs to be addressed, where a conflict involves someone with a direct report, then there has to be a process that needs to be followed to be able to equalize the playing. Okay. The second step that is critical in addressing a conflict. So the first one was identifying the issue. Second one is engage the parties concerned. For example, if there's now the two practices. In larger organizations, you find that the policy includes a conflict resolution committee. And then in smaller organizations, you find individuals, either the HR, person in charge of the HR function is the one who handles the conflicts. And it is dangerous for that individual or that committee to base their arguments on fast reports. So then they would have a skewed opinion of the conflict, and definitely there would be a skewed outcome. So it is critical that both parties or all parties involved are engaged, and most times it is useful to have them, to engage them both at the same time. However, that does not discount the need to engage them individually first so that you can get the individual perspectives. Then you engage them together. Explore solutions. This particular step would require input from the parties involved so that there's a collaboration or a brainstorming session to speak and does not mean that parties that are not involved cannot come in and bring in and have some input in the process. Normally, in conflict resolution, so that you can demonstrate neutrality, it is allowed to bring in as many people as reasonably possible. In some organizations, you'll find that staff are actually required, not allowed, but are required to bring a representative so that they may have, it's like a lawyer setup, so that they can have someone to speak for them or assist them in defending whatever conflict that is going on. And the other step is agreeing on action steps. This is critical because then it appears that the parties have agreed on which route to follow. So it is important to document and agree on action steps with timelines and attach the individuals that are required to take those actions. This, and like I said, documentation is paramount so that it can be followed up. And if anything falls through the crack, you can be able to track it and pick it up and realign it. So next steps is very critical. Now, follow-up. Follow-up, as I've mentioned, is also important so that you can be able to close out that conflict. All right. To close out of the conflict, the one thing that you can do, the one mistake one can make in an organization is leave a conflict situation to fester for too long, because it then mothballs into something else. And typically what happens is other conflicts come into play. So you begin having a pileup and it's no longer useful. Everybody feels aggrieved. Okay. Now, I just want to point out when you're setting up a conflict resolution process, it is one of the biggest mistakes that some organizations make is that they include the leadership of their organization in the process. What the effect that has is that then there's nobody that the aggrieved parties can appeal to. Because if the leadership is either in the committee and it's participating, he or she is participating in the decision-making process during the investigations and presentation to the committee, then it becomes the end. The aggrieved parties will have nowhere to run if they are not happy with the solution. And the risk there is that they'll probably decide to go and get resolution externally, which will be detrimental to the organization. So basically, you would either have a committee or you'll have someone in the HR function or the head of the HR function addressing conflict, or if there's no HR and in a substantive HR function, you would have the person handling the HR role activities, handling that at that level, then make a resolution, then they make a recommendation to the organizational leadership, so that then at that point they can look at it. It's like the Court of Appeal. They can look at it and see if there are missteps. And to tell you the truth, the organizational leadership will look at the bigger picture, because in some instances you'll find that the conflict is minor. However, the person that appears to be at fault is a high performer, and the organizational leadership will then look at the bigger picture and look at the damage, the impact of losing such an individual and retaining them, and how it would look like, and make an informed decision. Okay. And that, I think, covers the conflict resolution policy. It is a bit more detailed when you sit down to try and structure it. and come up with one that appeals to everybody. Now, I would like to open up the floor for questions, but I'd also like to mention that at the end of the session, we'll have a quiz. It's a multiple choice quiz. I think it was highlighted at the beginning. It's a multiple choice quiz that is not designed really to test how sharp the participants are. It's the intention is to help you commit what we've covered today into memory so that you can be able to apply them in your respective organizations so that they can help you. So we'd really encourage everybody to participate. You'll be sent a link, and it's a matter of clicking multiple choice, and will be very helpful. So any questions at this point? Yes, Sarah Carissa.
So what if the conflict is happening maybe from the senior most or the advisory level team members? How do you go about it? And you are one of the HR leads or maybe one of the persons who really want to help, but again, when you try to balance it, it's coming from the senior most position in the organization.
Okay. You know, everybody reports to someone. Everybody reports to someone. Leadership would report to some board or trustees or some donors. You see, there's such a saying that some things are beyond one's pay grade, because you cannot purport to, for example, as a HR function lead, you cannot purport to resolve disputes that are way above you. The best practice in this is if it comes to your attention, because you can't plant yourself in it. If it does come to your attention and it's happening above your pay grade, you would then make a recommendation based on existing guidelines, and this would be, this is something you might want to factor into your conflict resolution policy, and subsequently the HR manual, so that you have a fallback. Okay.
We have some questions in the chat, Greg.
Yes.
So there is a question from Peter. In a conflict resolution engagement for my former organization, a workmate was grieved and was supposed to be paid triple for the months that he was out of work.
Sorry, and a workmate was what?
Was aggrieved and
Yes.
was supposed to be paid triple for the months that he was out of work. Given that this was an added cost to a grant from a donor fund, it was considered an audit query, and the organization had challenges in effecting the payment. The question is, how do we curb some challenges in the future when the aggrieved party doesn't agree to a win-win situation?
Okay, when there's such a, for example, that particular challenge appears to take a legal tangent, because if the aggrieved party is entitled to 3 times payment, this must be based on either existing policy within the organization and therefore based on legal requirements, Employment Act, whether it's in Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, or wherever, right? So the defense that the organization has is that they don't have the funds to take care of that. So typically what happens, or what I've seen happening, is that there's an agreement that is entered into that the organization owes this individual that amount of money, and whenever the funds are available in future, then they'll be able to be paid off, right? The other aspect of when one of the parties is refusing to honor to take up responsibility, unfortunately, that ends up to the logical legal conclusion. Okay.
Thank you, Greg. There's 2 more questions in the chat that I see. From Brian, thanks for the presentation. The question, the Conflict Resolution Committee, can it comprise of the Board of Management?
Now, the Conflict Resolution Committee should be below the Board of Management. Now, when you're developing a policy, you need to have a look at your structure, right? And be cognizant of the levels you have in your structure. Now, a conflict resolution committee at the first instance will ideally be at the HR function level, where the committee must be diversely representative, right? Then they make a recommendation to the leadership, the head of the organization. Now, in some instances, organizations have categories where if the conflict involves someone fairly senior, the head of the organization cannot take a decision without reference to the board. So it becomes an agenda at the board level so that they make a decision, because at the HR function level, investigations have been done. They have sent the recommendations to the head of the organization, who has probably interrogated it, taken it back to them, requires additional information, has gone back up. And this would happen when it's a senior level individual who the head of the organization cannot take a decision on their own without board input. So that depends on individual processes. However, there are lower level, lower cadre, there are conflicts that involve lower cadre staff where a decision would definitely be made at the head of organization level.
Thank you, Greg. And there's one last, I guess we can answer this in the next 2 minutes, and then we can move to the quiz. So can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. For a conflict to be resolved well, do we have specific time frame for one to be given right of reply to the issue raised or concerns raised?
Okay. Best practice recommends timeframes. It is not specific what timeframe is required, but it must be a reasonable timeframe that depending on the situation arising. You see, now, if parties would like to resolve a conflict during that discussion, they have to agree on a time frame. If there's input that is required from either party, they have to agree by when it needs to come through, by whom, and by when. Right? It also requires that so basically, time frame is really important in conflict resolution. Now, some organizations have put it such that the policy indicates that if the agreed time frame is superseded, then it means that whoever is being accused has therefore been let go. However, with regard to this time frame issue, it becomes a performance issue for the HR function, because then I think in the next session we're going to have a performance management policy discussion. However, to be effective and be sure that a conflict resolution policy is effective, it has to be a key deliverable for whoever is in charge for that, in charge of that process. So then they are measured against it at the end of whatever period. So you can imagine at the end of the year, you're doing your appraisal and there are still several conflict resolution issues still hanging about that have taken, several months. So then that's a performance issue.
We are going to upload e-learning sessions in our East African Financial Resilient portal, learning portal, where we will have detailed guided trainings, individualized training that will award certificate for those who complete these sessions online. So these sessions we are doing highlights, but if you want to get more detailed training where the manual is there and interactive sessions in the e-learning platform, so we urge people to log in into the East African Financial Resilient portal, where you'll get this. We are currently working on them, and we'll be loading to cover all the 9 modules that we'll be covering in the next 3 months. So we urge people to make sure that you continue with the learning. We have continuous learning where we'll be having virtual sessions, but we'll also have online detailed learning, which will present certificates after completion. Asanteni sana, and looking forward to seeing you again on Friday for our second session on human resource and administration management. Otherwise, asanteni and God bless.